Okay, let's start. It's good to see that almost everyone is here today. I think maybe one person is missing. That's all. We are this week going to do something a little bit different. That is, during the first hour, I'll lecture about innovation techniques, and then after that hour, after the break, we will do a little exercise. But don't be nervous about the exercise, because you're not going to be graded on that. It's just to get into the matter and practice a little bit. Okay? And we are now in a new room, and it seems to be working very well. There's a little bit of echo. So that's good. Then you hear what I say twice, right? Automatic repetition. Of course, you can also watch this over again. And of course, I'm wondering a little bit how much you understand when I'm speaking English. I try to speak clearly, but still there may be some words and expressions that I'm using that may be unfamiliar to you. So it may be a good exercise for you also to listen to it once again and maybe look up a few things if there's something you don't understand. And then, of course, you have the chance to ask during the class. Ask the professor to clarify something. So, we'll have a little workshop during the second hour. So that is how it's going to work today. And on Wednesday too, we are going to do something a little bit different. But the focus is really on how can we improve our imagination, how can we generate ideas, and how can we work on ideas in order to make them better. So that's what we are going to talk a little bit about. This is a field that many people are making a living out of this, to be consultants for companies to help in the innovation process. I think the topic is not that difficult, and I don't think there's one technique that is significantly better than another technique, but you should know that certain elements have to be in place in order to have an efficient process of innovation when you are working in a group. So, working in a group is normally very productive if it's set up right. We'll talk a little bit about what is brainstorming. And, well, brainstorming is when there's a storm inside your brain, right? The concept of brainstorming is that you should not just think in conventional ways, but you should think in a little bit turbulent ways, right? Out of the usual pattern. So that's the idea of brainstorming, and we'll look into the classical brainstorming a little bit more. Then there is something called Discussion 66. So, not to insult anyone who came up with that ideal Discussion 66, well, of course, it's a catchy word. Catchy, it sounds really sexy, right? but it has to do with 6 people working on 6 topics and for 6 minutes in each topic, etc. And it's really aiming at a larger group, how one could work on a problem, divide it up, and create a lot of ideas. And then, of course, in any technique where you aim at generating ideas, one thing is to come up with ideas, but you have to process these ideas. You have to sort them and find out what is good and what's not so good. And there is a development where you can do one series of brainstorming, a la the classical brainstorming, and then you can look at the results and start the brainstorming over again. Negative brainstorming, then you don't start with the ideas, but you start in the problem end, and you look at what is it that is influencing the problem, or what factors are associated with the problem, and then you start at that problem end and you go back in order to come up with some good idea. So it's a variation on brainstorming. There's a method 635, as opposed to 6-6, and then again dividing the topic in different sections, and you do a technique in groups and topics and time. Brain writing, and that is, I don't know what that is, but it's really writing intuitively ideas you come up with. Idea card brain writing. I'm sure it's just a variation of the gallery method. I'm not quite sure, but you can look it up. Delphi method is also kind of a brainstorming type technique, but what does the word Delphi mean to you? Have you heard about the oracle at Delphi in Greece, old Greece? You have not heard about that in your history books? But the old Greeks, they went to the oracle in Delphi if they were going to have the answer when it comes to the future. For instance, if they were going to win a war, or if what was going to happen in the future. And at Delphi there were some virgins that were influenced by the fume from the ground, and they were kind of delirious, that they were not talking comprehensively, and then somebody had to interpret what these ladies were saying. But the oracle at Delphi had a great standing in decision making in old Greece. But the Delphi method is really to have a more structured brainstorming technique, where you, instead of having, let's say, everyone participate, you put together a group of people with particular competencies, let's say wise people, and you structure a process with experts in order to come up with some good ideas. So that is one technique to, let's say, assure that the knowledge content in the solution would be there. People who know something. And of course, in any brainstorming group, it's good to have people with knowledge. So if we are going to design something, it's not, I think we had an example of it just before coming here now. We listened to a guest lecture by some people who were very creative designers, but they were not engineers. course, you can come up with a lot of ideas that maybe look intriguing, interesting, but the chances for these ideas to work are rather small, because when you don't know science, things normally don't work. So that is something to think about. Notebook, I guess that is something you do, a brainstorming process or some writing technique that you do over some period of time. So the point with this is just to show that there are many techniques, but there are some commonalities, some common features to these different techniques that should be there in order to have a good session of developing ideas. And just to show you that one can make this a field in itself, classical brainstorming, and I have written consultant version. So that would typically be people who facilitate, who are consultants and come to a company and help in brainstorming. So form a team consisting of subject matter expert as well as non-subject matter experts. And that is normally a good thing. Of course, the experts should be there for knowledge, but then again, experts very often are used to think in a particular way. So when you graduate from KAIST, you will be experts, but I want you not to have this vision, I want you to have this vision. Define the problem the team will brainstorm solutions for. So even though you have a topic, you have to maybe start by getting into a clearer definition of what the problem is. Ensure that the team understands the problem. So of course one could discuss the definition and make sure that everyone agrees. Explain the classical brainstorming rules. We'll come back to that. So there are certain things you should do and certain things you should not do when you do brainstorming. And then you start the process, and you have to record in some way, write down the ideas that come up. And the duration is of course, there has to be a time frame, and there may be a good idea also to have some breaks. And then you try to make some of these ideas converge. And then there are techniques for prioritizing. But the simplest way of prioritizing is just a vote, isn't it? To ask everyone, which one do you think is best, number 2, number 3? And thereby you can, in the group, simply vote for what is the best idea. So here you see also the table that it was referred to, the rules of the classic brainstorming process. All ideas are recorded, no criticism, all ideas are valid. So when somebody is working in an early phase on an idea, and particularly in the brainstorming phase of it, one should be very, very careful about criticizing or killing an idea. And the main reason for that is that one idea may trigger another idea, right? So some people who see this, and then suddenly see, no, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like that. So they suggest a different version. Quantity is important, not quality. Well, one could argue that one, but what it says here is really that one should have many ideas to select from. Be imaginative, be creative. And what I also said, build on top of each other's ideas. Get to the point. Be clear, specific, even though you haven't really formulated your thought too far. When you present it to the group, you should be able to write at least what the idea is about. Very, very short, a sentence or two maybe. And taking breaks. So, the flow of idea generation, many ideas, take a break, second ideas, build upon and combine, right? And here it's even used the word hybrid. Hybrid, I guess, is when you put things together, so it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, then it becomes a hybrid solution. And a pause, and fewer but deeper ideas, so that means you have to do the sorting that we talked about. And fourth, ideas are exhausted, and maybe the people who are doing this would be exhausted as well. So that is a longer. This, what I've put up here, would take at least half a day if there are quite a few people. Of course, we are not going to use half a day when we practice this. We do it more compressed. But just to give you an idea about what this feels like in practice. So one can simplify these 3 slides and define your problem or issue as a creative challenge. And one should be creative. Time limit for proposing an idea, for instance, half an hour. And again, no immediate criticism. Laughing is okay. Skeptical comments are not. So the point is, this can be fun. People come up with the most crazy ideas, but it may trigger something, and if it's very creative, a typical reaction is to laugh, but laugh in a good way, not in a, let's say, skeptical way. There are many ways of laughing, right? So select the ideas you like best, and preferably in some sort of common agreement. And I mentioned voting could be one way of doing it. Write down the 5, which idea is best to solve the problem. Should start with should, and scoring, and the idea with the best score will hopefully solve the problem. Hopefully. So that one doesn't have to make this into something very big and complicated. It's just a few elements that should be there in the brainstorming process. And on the first slide I started with on brainstorming, there's something called CPS, and that is creative problem solving, define the problem, find facts. If you are really going to work on a difficult problem, find facts. So this is, let's say, a more extensive process where you have more time. In a brainstorming session, you're mainly working on ideas, whereas as you get into this creative problem solving, you should maybe be a little bit more systematic with fact finding and so on. Come up with possible solutions which should integrate knowledge, imagination and process and evaluate. But this CPS is something that some people refer to. And again, it's a relative to brainstorming. So that is a simple CPS. And then there's versions of that. There's a 7-step CPS and there's a 9-step, etc. Orientation. I'm not going to spend much time on this. Pointing to the problem, preparation, gathering pertinent data, fact-finding. And unfortunately, many of the creative ideas that people go ahead with, they do this without really having the real background for defining the problem. So we heard, for instance, about oil spill in this guest lecture before coming here. Of course, if you're going to work on dealing with oil spills, you have to have fact data about what an oil spill is, to understand the physics of it, to understand what is available in terms of equipment today, etc. And then you can sort this information that you have and analyze it, and then you could pile up alternatives with some ideas, and then let it mature. Incubation. In startup companies, we often talk about incubation. That's a time to grow and invite illumination. There may be some people outside that could help you illuminate, shed light on the problem or the ideas that you have been proposing. Putting together the pieces, that's a synthesis, and that is, putting things together, and verification to assess again what you have come up with. So this is a maturing process for creativity and developing solutions based on some ideas. So that can be one approach as well. But you should be aware of, and we have talked about innovation. Remember the definition of innovation? It's an invention is something, a new idea that is possible to realize or to build, if you like, so to speak. But innovation should be really suitable for some market. So one has to go from dreams to reality, and that may be a pretty long step. You can dream up a solution, but really to make this materialize, to become something that is practical and something that the society or the market or people want, that is a long step. So one has to go from dreaming or imagination to implementation, to make it. One has to go from the creative process to making a product, and from generating, one has to go to developing. You know, normally when you are going to make a new product, there are many stages, and what you come up with first isn't good enough. So also on the implementation side, you have to do more development. And from just being novel, being new, as for instance is a requirement for patenting, what really counts is that it's useful. Well, what's the purpose of inventing something that has no function of practical significance? Nobody wants to use it. And as a matter of fact, I would think maybe more than 90% of things that are patented in the end turn out not to be so useful. And you go for something soft, which is, let's say, an idea, to the hard stuff where you actually build and make something. So do you see what I'm getting at here? To make you understand the process. And this is the best way of understanding this is by trying yourself. So that's why we are going to have this little exercise. And also in the student innovation project, we are going to work based on principles like this. So again, to be a little bit more specific, if you are in a company, if you are a manager in a company, you see that you have a problem, so you have to define it. And then you can, of course, challenge your employees to come up with many ideas. You know, some companies have an idea box. Have you heard about this? Sort of a mailbox. And employees are encouraged to come up with ideas for improvement in the company. So they can write that on a sheet of paper and drop it in the box. They can write their name, or they maybe don't have to. But some companies do this very systematically, and at the end of the year or something like that, they give a reward to the best idea, to the person who has come up with the best idea. But for that to make sense, that's a commitment also for the management. You can't just ask your employees to come up with ideas and then you don't care about what comes in, right? So if you really initiate such a process, then you should follow up. You know, you should care. So having some ideas, one could, for instance, start a brainstorming. Well, select, if you have thousands of employees, I don't think you should start that process with all the employees, but at least, you know, select those that are relatively close to the problem that this idea is addressing. Evaluation or proposed next summary improvements. Assessment and feedback by independent experts. You may call upon experts if it's beyond what is just simple. And you can start a pre-project. Then you as a manager should have some money in your pocket to pay for these projects, right? If you're really serious about following up innovation in the company, you should really be systematic, and you should have resources available for doing this. So, and there may be, for instance, pre-projects, facts, feasibility, viability, and conclusion. Here are probably some words that are not quite familiar to you. Facts, you know what is. Feasibility, is it feasible? Is it possible to make? Viability, it has to do with life. Is this an idea that will survive when it comes to, the real world, the competition? And conclusion. So beyond if things come out positive, then one could start a technical study project, one could consider patenting, one could initiate a second project stage with more technical contents, focus on production and commercial potential. This is something that maybe sometimes should be brought up earlier in the process. The commercial potential. Because is there a market? How big is the market? Etc. But then again, we also talked about really good ideas where there is no market. But still they turn out to be very good ideas. But then the idea has to be really very smart. Like shipping containers. And then there could be further stages. So there are many ways of doing it, and I'm not trying to sell to you one particular way to go about innovation. But having this background and, let's say, being in a company, you can see what way hopefully would be the best to promote innovation in the company and how to develop things into something that could turn out to be very, very useful. So this is related to the previous one. How can a company become better at innovating? And again, define the problem. Look at the market. Is it something that somebody wants? Is it consistent with the company's strategy? Encourage idea generation. I just talked about that. Use some techniques like brainstorming. Use a process for screening of ideas. And then you have to take care of the good ideas. Again, much of what I've already said, but there has to be a commitment. And a very good thing, I think, is for managers at the very high level in the company to get involved in this. Normally they would say, oh, we are so busy with the commercial aspects, so busy with the market. But also, let's say, more commercial managers should get involved in this. That is my strong belief. Because then they also, in this process, help establishing a better communication within the company. So, and I'm not sure if you have heard this expression, to kiss a frog. Well, it's not very tempting to kiss a frog, is it? So that is there may be many ideas that come up during this process, and some of them you really don't want to touch. But what it says here, kiss many frogs, that is, at least take the time to have contact with these ideas and see what maybe you have misunderstood when you think that this is plain stupid. But when it's explained to you as a manager, then you may suddenly realize that this is not just a slimy frog, but it's something that could be of great value to your company. So in the company also develop projects and then dealing with IPR. And you know what that means? I mentioned it sometimes before. I stands for intellectual, and P stands for property, and R stands for rights, intellectual property rights. So that is a concept larger than just patenting, but how can the company deal with and protect the immaterial values within the company. So that's something we're going to talk about. Immaterial values, that's intellectual values. And it can be a patent, it can be that the company has knowledge, knows how to make something. Very skilled workers, for instance. And that is also immaterial values in the company. So it's not just money in the bank or production equipment or a building. The value of what is in the organization and in the people can be much larger than the value of the building. So awareness. So this is from an adventure story. A girl who kissed the frog and it turned out to be a prince. That's where the expression comes from. So the frog says to the princess, "I am a prince," and then the princess has the choice. Does she want to kiss the frog to see if it is a prince or not? So here we should kiss frogs. Yes? Well, it may not look that attractive, right? But that's the whole point. It may turn out to be a very good idea, right? And if you are reluctant, if you by attitude is not positive, you'll kill these good ideas. So by kissing the idea, right, to give it time or maybe some funding or doing some brainstorming, it may turn out to be an extremely smart idea. It may not look that way. So it's just a picture of a situation. So now you know what it means to kiss a frog, right? So you just have to go out and find a frog. Okay, I asked you the last time to think about the problem I stated with the LNG market. So that's what we'll work on during the next hour after the break. So we have a shipbuilding company. It's been partly working in LNG on licensed technology. Sees that there's a big market growth. And this could be a market opportunity, right? And then there are some uncertainties. We talked about the present financial crisis that is hitting very hard in some geographical areas. For instance, in North America, where they have really become interested in shale gas. That is gas in sedimentary deposits, which is very hard to get out, polluting. But still, shale gas has received a lot of attention recently. So some experience from building LNG ships, but they have been relying on external assistance and licensed technology. And they have not been able to appear in the market as a leading shipbuilder for LNG. And then the management understand that something has to be done in order to obtain success. So innovation may be a strategic solution. Well, it may be. But then again, if it's going to be a solution for strategy, you really have to have some good ideas, don't you? You can't just say that we are going to be innovative and we are going to succeed. You have to do something. And see if you come up with some bright technical ideas. So the staff of engineers is there, young and old, but they have a weak record on innovation. So one could say, even though it's a good staff, they are not sufficiently qualified when it comes to innovation. That's their history. So the question is, how should the management proceed? And in this case, the management proceeds with initiating a brainstorming process, and you are the happy few who have been selected for this brainstorming process. Aren't you happy? So you remember this, growth in the market, and very much there are new entrants, new countries coming into the picture, new countries that want to have gas. China and India, for instance, and in North America, the hunger for gas imports is very great because they have exploited their own resources, of course, aside from the shale gas. And in continental Europe, you see there isn't much growth. As a matter of fact, I just read the other day that the energy consumption in EU has gone down during the last year. That's quite remarkable. Of course, there may be two sides to it. One side is one has become better at saving and have, let's say, better cars and better solutions. But the other part of it, which is not so positive, is that, of course, the financial crisis has hit and there is less economical activity. So, but I think Europe maybe and UK as well, with slowing growth, may be a little bit different from what you see particularly over here. And that means that some of the markets are shifting from one location to some new locations. And when there are new locations coming up, that may mean new opportunities, right? If the market suddenly starts growing in one area, maybe when you do your strategic thinking and brainstorming, you should think a little bit about where are the interesting markets now. But there's been a significant growth, so maybe one is too late. But then again, there's a lot of very old ships, more than 30 years old. That doesn't mean that they have to be phased out, but they are, if they have been properly maintained, but they are close to being scrapped. And they may not be the best technology for what is needed for the future. So the market as such may also squeeze out the older ships. And then we have the size factor. Big is beautiful in this case. Do you have the economy of scale? The larger ship, the more efficient, right? Because the volume you carry on the ship is really where you generate your income, and if you don't need any more crew on a big ship than a smaller ship, then of course there's a saving there too. We talked about shale gas as a threat to at least the North American market. So this is kind of a summary of the market factors. So I think we'll stop there and take a break. Yeah, this also I showed some of the current technical systems. So in this brainstorming process, after the break, you may also propose some technical solutions if you have some. But not only that. So since we don't have much time, I will kind of structure the brainstorming process a little bit more than one normally should do, but I will do that in order for you to be efficient. Okay?